You know, as I stand here in Norwegian fjords, which normally have a beautiful landscape, and as I look on these windmills behind me here that was set up against almost everyone's will to produce electricity, which they barely do, and thinking about BlackRock, which owns these, I'm reflecting a little bit about the video Fimbul Winter is Coming that I made here on this channel, because I've been thinking for the past few weeks there's one thing I should have mentioned. I mean, have you heard about Maslow? I imagine most of you have. He had this the 5 levels of security, Maslow. And if you would write a recipe on how to create insecurity and how to create havoc and how to create bad times that will eventually get even worse. There's so much going on now, and things are worsening, tightening up. And what I talked about a little bit in this Fimbul Winter is Coming and what we can learn from history, that video, is that if things will get worse, who will survive? And afterwards someone needs to rebuild, right? And I'm sure there are many plans for that. And I'm not saying there's a recipe, there's a this is part of a new world order program that this and Harari have talked so much about. But you know, it begs the question, because as I mentioned in this Fimbul Winter video, it's kind of weird that we've had this whole pandemic with a huge lockdown, and it's been a precedence on how much bureaucrats and administrators can go into our own personal lives and decide even how we should act and what we can say to our children. Even I mean, even children are told to tell teachers at school if daddy doesn't comply. Oh man, all the havoc we've been through all around the world. And I tell you, never before in history have so many people walked in line or marched or complied or been through the same phases of fear and anxiety and all of that. And you know what? In January this year, once we got control of this whole pandemic, once we felt that now 2022 will get much better, then it all got worse. It didn't take more than what, 2-3 weeks before war broke out. And you know, if you follow a recipe, if you write a recipe on how to undermine personal freedom and how to attack people, not openly, but really, you know, disrupt the family, society, and threaten us after we have complied like sheep, you would use Maslow. You would use that recipe of the 3. I mean, if you want to have self-realization, you got to have those 3 at the bottom of the pyramid of Maslow. You know, you need security, you need food, you need shelter, and you need to be able to take care of yourself. You need to have it well economically, financially. And if all these 3 levels are threatened, you can never have self-realization. You can never get to level 4 and 5, which is sort of like what we want to do, how we want to live, how we want our societies to be, with all those 5 levels in Maslow's pyramid. What's puzzling to me is that if you were to write a recipe on how to, you know, take over with a new world order, you would actually use a recipe pretty similar to what we've been experiencing now, according to Maslow. And I know there are a lot of smart people and geniuses around the world, and who are talking about control and how to control people, and people having fear for all the unknown, like, you know, misanthropic people, meaning thinking the worst in humankind, like we're sort of like the Lord of the Flies, that book. If we got total freedom, things will go all to hell. And sure, if you want to think that, go ahead. That's why, like I said in my first video on this channel, that's why so many men and women, of course, are out in the nature, like here in Norway, because we just, when it gets too much, too tight, that square, when you can't live in it, and you can't really, I mean, with the conformity and everything, you can't almost be seen breaking these boundaries of the square. You're expected to be in the middle inside, to behave. And what I can't fathom or just understand, these are smart people. And I'm not saying these smart people have planned all this. I'm not saying that. I'm just, it's kind of curious. But you know, there's a backlash here. If you want to push your agenda so hard, it's and call everyone who disagrees with you for fascists, and you act like a fascist because you use violence to hold people down, or a threat of violence, you know, like we've seen so many places in the past few years in the West. Oh my. Yeah, and if you don't comply, you got to stay under the radar. Wait and wait and wait. Timing is everything, right? In the Fimbul Winter video, I asked who's gonna survive. And now I ask, who are seeing this? And you see or realize the backlash that might come after so many people have been experiencing a forced agenda and a false narrative and a breach of our personal freedom and a breakup of our families and a threat to everything that represents security for us. It's not good. And I'm thinking, you know, sticking with like-minded people, staying out in nature, not maybe having societies that aren't too big. You know, there's a reason why the clan culture and the family has worked so well, and larger families also have worked so well for so many thousands of years. That's what we are prone to. That's what we were programmed to in our genes, even DNA. And maybe we should adjust societies into smaller communities in a sense. And I'm not saying go all hippie Danish 1970s style. I'm not saying that. I'm saying let's make it simpler. Let's spend more time in nature. Let's concentrate on our own lives, and let's not live that much digitally, but stick to the analog things, you know, what we can feel, what is good for us, like hormones that are good for us, not just dopamine from looking at your screen all the time, but oxytocin, for example, the love hormone, which is actually based on touch. You can't feel that digitally in the same way. You can't. And serotonin, and you know all of these things. You know, we're simple people. Well, there are a lot of things that can control us, and we're easily controllable. That's what I'm saying. And we're not so difficult human beings. Humans are simple, but we have this abstract way of thinking that can be very complicated. We can use a lot of complicated words, and there are a lot of things that we accept that really don't exist physically, but we accept it, I guess, collectively, and then it exists. I mean, even Harari wrote about this, which is basically something you can use to your advantage, which I see a lot of people do. or we can use it to our personal gain. Because if you realize we're not that simple, no, sorry, if you realize we're actually very simple, we can also stick to simple things, because that's all. That always works. That works for me anyway. That's why I need to go out into nature like this in the fall and look at all the beautiful colors. Man, I drove across the mountains here in Norway, 1,200 meters. Everything was orange and yellow and red, and oh, that's good. And first and foremost, we should take care of each other, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk, like I'm trying to talk with you now. And please, I'd like to hear your opinions, and if you have, especially on Maslow, and I call it a recipe, but I'm not saying anyone has planned this. I'm just saying it's quite curious, everything that's going on. And if it is a recipe, if there is a plan, at least it's predictable. And that should tell us something, how to prepare.